Having entered the operational space, the 125th Rifle Corps continued its rapid offensive. For 17 days of January 1945, the Corps units with battles passed 325 kilometers. To characterize the pace of the offensive, it is enough to indicate that on average daily we advanced with battles forward by 19 kilometers. At the end of January 28, 1945, we crossed the German-Polish state border near Pisgao. Finally, Germany, fighters and commanders said excitedly, so the war would soon be over. In those days, in the army newspaper was printed a letter of Red Army man Boretsky to his fellow countrymen in Dnipropetrovsk region. It is difficult to convey the joy and pride with which our hearts are full. For several days we have been fighting in the very lair of the fascist beast, on German soil. Already in 2 orders, Comrade Stalin thanked us for the victories on German territory. In these battles I destroyed 2 enemy machine guns and 1 car with ammunition with my armor-piercing rifle. Each fighter, with all his heart, felt the greatness of those days of the historic offensive. Soviet soldiers went through the settlements of Nazi Germany, firmly approaching Berlin. For more than 3 years we dreamed of these days, and when we fought heavy defensive battles near Leningrad, Moscow, Stalingrad, and in the Caucasus, leaving our native land watered with the blood of our best fighting friends, we never gave up hope. The day would come when we would come to Germany. Now that hour has come. After the breakthrough of the enemy's defense in the interfluve of the Bug, Nera and Vistula rivers on January 15, 1945, and after the 47th Army's units reached the left bank of the Vistula River and liberated Warsaw, the capital of Poland, on January 17, 1945, the enemy tried to delay our advance by rearguard battles at intermediate lines in order to put up decisive resistance after regrouping at the previously prepared defensive strip along the former German-Polish border. The main defensive strip was prepared on the line of Stolp, Deutsch, Krohn, Schneidermoor, Glogo, and further along the Oder River. The fortifications in the areas of Deutsch, Krohn, Schneidermoor, and Neustetten were the main resistance nodes of the modern type, which were modernized in 1939-1942 and equipped with machine gun and gun emplacements flanking pillbox. 2 weeks after the beginning of the offensive, the units of the 125th Infantry Corps approached this defensive strip and from February 2 engaged in hard fighting to break through the heavily fortified enemy positions on the approaches to the most important communications hub and stronghold of the German defense in Pomerania, the town of Deutsch Krohn. The battles were extremely tense. Deutsch Krohn appeared before us surrounded by solid trenches and anti-tank ditches. On the approaches to it, a large number of pillboxes and other long-term structures, stone buildings with massive walls of old construction Hitlerites adapted to a strong defense. In the walls of the houses, loopholes for firing at the streets. Cellars of the houses, especially corner ones, were equipped as shelters, and at the same time cellar windows and specially pierced oblong loopholes were adapted for direct fire. Single and group trenches were dug in the gaps between and behind the buildings. In the battles on the outskirts of the city, and in the city itself, the enemy widely used Faustpatrons. In addition, the most important erections were covered by direct fire guns and tanks. After careful and detailed study of the enemy defense, fire system, engineering barriers, artillery grouping, exchanging views with the commanders of the 76th Infantry Division, Colonel Gervasiev, and 175th Infantry Division, Colonel Vidrigan, and supporting the compounds of the 125th Rifle Corps, commander of the 30th Guards Cannon Artillery Brigade, Guards Colonel Zhigarev, decided part of the forces of the 76th and 175th Infantry Divisions, with the support of the 30th Guards Cannon Artillery Brigade, to bind the enemy's defense, running along the eastern fortified line from the front. The main forces of the divisions to bypass the Hitlerites, defending the city from the north of the 76th, and from the south of the 175th and strike from the west, from the rear of the enemy, to break into the city of Deutsch Krohn. On February 9, 1945, the 76th Infantry Division on its right flank, with the main forces, went on the offensive. Having broken the resistance of Hitlerites, the 207th and 93rd Rifle Regiments seized the settlements Klausdorfer Hammer, Klausdorf, and by the morning of February 10, 1945, came out. 207th Rifle Regiment to the northern and 93rd Rifle Regiment. To the western outskirts of the fate of the encircled garrison of Deutsch Krohn was essentially decided. Fierce street battles broke out. Former commander of the 76th Infantry Division, now Lieutenant General Jervasiev, recalls such an episode. Of the two pillboxes located in the gap between the lakes Bichno and Smolno, and reliably covering an area no more than 300 meters wide, we knew how to suppress one. The communist Sergeant Kamayev Kulchek, together with his combat friend, a soldier sapper whose surname, to my great regret, I have not been able to establish, volunteered to blow up the other one. February 10. In the morning, barely dawned, two desperate daredevils went to perform a responsible and no less dangerous task. They decided to approach the pillbox from the rear. There's a lake on the way, ice water up to their waists. With a load of explosives, they crossed the lake. Hundreds of meters with bated breath, crawling crept up to the target. And when they stopped for a moment to catch their breath, to listen to the hidden silence, the heart beat so fast in the chest that its pounding seemed to be heard in the distance. At last we reached the firing point unnoticed. The Germans were sleeping through the morning dawn. There's the embrasure. The explosive charge is planted. A strong explosion, and fragments of concrete and metal flew into the air. The explosion was also a signal to open fire from the gun on another pillbox, sending shell after shell through the embrasure. The gun silenced the firing point for a long time, at least for a while, until the rifle companies broke through to the first trench, and the assault group came to the pillbox and blew it up. In the course of the battle, several more long-range fire points were blocked and blown up. Senior Sergeant Koljok Kamayev passed a glorious combat way. A son of sunny Turkmenistan, fighter Kamayev highly carried the title of a communist, continuously improved his combat skills. He chased the Germans from Smolensk, cleared Soviet Belarus from them, chased the Nazis through the fields of Poland, finished the damned fascist rabble on the territory of Germany itself. Glorious combat feats raised the honor of the banner of his unit Kamayev. Many governmental awards decorated the chest of the brave Soviet soldier. Listening to the story of my comrade in arms, connected with the battles for Dutch Krone, I can't help but say that the soldiers of many nationalities of our motherland fought heroically shoulder to shoulder in the units of the 125th Rifle Corps. Far from their native land, they were firmly united into one fighting family. The hard military share and love of the Soviet people were equally shared by all of them. At the beginning of 1945, the chief of the political department of the Corps, Alexei Ilyich Kolunov, showed me not quite an ordinary letter. Dear comrades, it said, I, Sayadam Niazove, a linkwoman of the collective farm named after Sverdlov in Ashgabat district of Turkmen SSR, collected all my savings and contributed them to the Red Army Fund. My money was used to buy a cannon, 760,094, and sent to your unit where my brother Gataman Kalmuradov is serving. When you receive my gift, I ask you, our glorious artillerymen, together with the whole Red Army, kill the wounded German beast with my cannon and hoist the victory banner over Berlin. We are separated by thousands of kilometers, but we are always with you, our dear liberators. We are working selflessly and tirelessly in the rear, and we will give you everything you need for the final victory over the German invaders. We are waiting for you to return to your homeland with victory. The request of collective farmer Sayadam Niazova was satisfied. The 76 ME gun purchased at her expense went to the 80th Artillery Red Banner Regiment of the 76th Rifle Division, where her brother Senior Sergeant Gataman Kalmuradov served as a gunner in the 1st Battery. Lieutenant General Godin, commander of the artillery of the 47th Army, and Colonel Klaykovkin, deputy chief of the political department of the 47th Army, in front of the regiment after reading out the order for the division, which noted the great concern of the Soviet people for the Red Army, satiety of the front and rear, and the patriotism of the Soviet people, handed the cannon to Staff Sergeant Kalmuradov. Accepting this cannon bought for me by my sister, said the warrior excitedly, be assured that I will beat the fascist beast mercilessly with it. Let the German invaders know our strength. Let this gun multiply the glory of Russian artillery, the glory of our Soviet people. Major Spiridon Dmitrievich Postolika, commander of the 80th Artillery Red Banner Regiment, read the reply to Sister Sayadam Niazova. The entire personnel of the unit where your brother serves, the letter said, was present at the awarding of the cannon, and all of us fighters, sergeants and officers send you Sayadam Niazova, our frontline thanks for caring for the armed forces of our country. Only in our socialist country, in the country created by the great genius of mankind Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, In the country where all peoples live joyfully and happily, all our people participate in the defense of their beloved fatherland. Recently, one of our officers, Comrade Sitakov, received a letter from Comrade Berdiev, chairman of the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the Turkmen Republic. From this letter, we learned how much the workers of our brotherly Republic of Turkmenistan have done to strengthen the fighting ability of the glorious Red Army. We thank you for your selfless labor for the benefit of our beloved Your brother, Gataman Khalmiradov, is one of the best and bravest soldiers of our unit. For his military skill and courage, he was awarded medals for bravery and for combat merit. The last battles we fought were especially fierce. German fascist bandits, sensing their imminent death, resisted with the desperation of the doomed. And in these battles, the gun crew of Senior Sergeant Esenov Hojakuli, in which your brother serves, tried with all its might to inflict the enemy as much damage as possible. Only in one of the battles the calculation crushed 2 cannons, 3 mortars, 2 machine guns, 1 anti-aircraft gun, 3 vehicles, and, repulsing the enemy counterattacks, killed up to 30 German soldiers and officers. The fierce battles, which were reported in the letter to Turkmenistan, were fought over Deutsche Krone. The artillerymen did a great job here, destroying enemy defensive structures by direct fire, destroying its manpower and equipment. The 80th Artillery Regiment of the 76th Rifle Division made a worthy contribution to our victory and became Red Banner. On February 11, 1945, compounds of the 125th Rifle Corps of the 47th Army, breaking the stubborn resistance of the fascists, captured an important communications hub and a strong stronghold in the city of Deutsche Krone. Many units of the corps received high awards of the motherland. 93rd Rifle Regiment, Order of the Red Banner; 207th Rifle Regiment, Order of Suvorov I degree; 216th Rifle Regiment, Order of Kutuzov I degree, to the units of the 125th Rifle Corps, 76th Rifle Yelninsko Varshavskaya Red Banner, Order of Suvorov, and 175th Rifle Irokovelskaya Red Banner Divisions, and its soldiers, officers, and generals. The Supreme Commander-in-Chief declared gratitude. Meanwhile, in 60 kilometers to the southeast in the encircled Schneider Mule since February 1 fiercely resisted 12,000 group of Hitlerites, striving to bind as much of our forces as possible. At the end of February 11, 1945, the commander of the 1st Belarusian Front Marshal of the Soviet Union G.K. Zhukov ordered me with the field command of the corps to take the battle group of troops storming the fortress city from the deputy commander of our army, Major General K. Kuzmin, and within 2 days to defeat the enemy grouping in Schneider Mule. February 12, 1945. The management of the 125th Infantry Corps took the battle group. Schneider Mule Fortress is located among forests, which from the north, northeast, and east cover it, within a radius of up to 10-15 kilometers, and in the north more than 50 kilometers. The outer defense of the fortress was based on a system of lakes surrounding the city from the east, in a semicircle. Part of the western facade of the outer outline was covered by a swamp. The inner rim of the western facade rested on the crest of unnamed heights, which dominated the surrounding terrain. Hitler's defense in Schneider Mure was characterized by special cruelty and was designed for long resistance of its garrison. On the eastern side of the city had 3 bypasses, inner, main, and outer. The western part of the city had 2 bypasses, outer and inner. Each bypass is a line of trenches and in a number of places anti-tank ditches, all sorts of anti-tank obstacles and mine barriers. In addition, the main outline on the eastern sector was reinforced with pillboxes, half-caponiers and caponiers. Kirks and large buildings were used as strongpoints. Loopholes were pierced in the walls of houses to fire into streets and especially intersections. The Schneider Mule garrison had a large amount of military equipment, rich stores of food and ammunition, and well-equipped airfields. The total strength of all units and subdivisions in the town reached more than 12,000 men. Discipline was maintained by all means accepted in the Nazi army. On January 28, 1945, Himmler, who commanded the defense in Pomerania, personally arrived in Schneidermühl and gave the garrison the task of defending the fortress to the last soldier. Regularly, every night on transport planes to the city delivered everything necessary and evacuated the wounded. All available units and subdivisions of the command of the fortress brought together in 2 detachments. The 1st Composite Detachment under the command of Colonel Bonan defended the outer rim of the city. The main and inner bypasses were defended by the 2nd Composite Detachment, headed by the commandant of the fortress, Obersturmbannführer Reschlinger. By 8:00 a.m. on February 12, 1945, the 125th Rifle Corps command took over the units and formations blocking the Schneidermühl fortress. In order to solve the task and fulfill the order of the commander of the 1st Belarusian Front, it was necessary to find the reasons for the failure of combat operations of the Army Task Force from February 3 to 11, 1945. Carefully conducted reconnaissance of the enemy's defense, reconnaissance of the front line of the corps commander with the commanders of units, formations and commanders of reinforcement units revealed not only strong but also weak areas of the defense of the fortress city. With the exit of our units on the unnamed heights, the city could be shot through. With the capture of the railroad station and workshops to hold the part of Schneidermühl, which was on the west bank of the river Kado, became impossible. At the reconnaissance, this was perfectly understood by the commanders of rifle regiments and commanders of reinforcement units. On the terrain division, commanders were pointed out the main objects to be captured first. Their fall made pointless and impossible further resistance of the garrison as a whole. There it was also decided to move the observation points of units from the basement so that the commanders constantly saw in front of them the battlefield and the attacked objects, could promptly make the necessary decisions. I ordered all cannon batteries and 2 howitzer batteries from each artillery regiment to be put on direct aiming, all Diesch and machine guns to be reduced to batteries and installed in the attics of houses or on the windows of the 2nd, 3rd floors of buildings. After conducting reconnaissance and giving preliminary combat orders, together with the task force of the Corps headquarters arrived at the command post of the commander of the 60th Infantry Division, Major General V.G. Chernov. With the commander and officers of the division headquarters, there was a business-like exchange of views on issues related to the fulfillment of the combat task to eliminate the Schneidermühl grouping of Hitlerites. Viktor Georgievich, I asked a question to the general. Your division has been fighting in this area for more than 10 days. What do you explain such a long delay in defeating the enemy in the area of Schneidermühl? Going to the map spread out on the table, the division commander took a sharpened red pencil and, using it as a pointer, without preamble began to clearly report. Schneidermühl is a fortress with long-term structures. The strongest engineering structures on the eastern side. The northwest side is less fortified. The enemy has masterfully built and organized the defense, competently selected and equipped strongholds in neighborhoods, streets, squares, created a lot of false strongholds traps. Their main task is to direct our fire strikes to secondary directions and to draw the attackers into the firebags between the blocks and squares. Now, more than ever, concentration of forces and firepower is important. I shared my thoughts with the general. In street battles in a fortress city such as Schneidermühl, it is required not to squeeze the enemy to the center of the city, but to seize key objects piece by piece, to split the defense, breaking the interaction between fortified objects and resistance nodes. Then we talked about how effective, stable and operative is the battle management in all links of combat orders of our combat group. You and I, Viktor Georgievich, I couldn't resist a reproach. Now we are sitting and talking in a deep basement. This is a shelter, not an observation post for operational effective battle management. In urban combat, and especially in the battle for the city fortress, it is necessary to manage from the upper points to see the main key object of the enemy's defense, the battle of our assault groups, from the successful actions of which splits the defense and collapses fire and strike interaction, organized by the Nazis. It was unpleasant for me to remind the combat general of this, but not only he had to reorganize the work for a new way. In street battles, our assault groups should elbow and soul feel their commander, and then he will never be late to support and develop a private success of the assault group in the general. What are the nearest plans of the Nazis? Where is their main grouping? Where are their key strongholds? Where and in what directions they show special persistence? What on these issues reported General Army, Artillery and Engineering Scouts? Changing the topic of conversation, I asked the division commander. According to our scouts, the main grouping of the enemy in the areas of the northern and northeastern outskirts of the city, answered the general. Here Hitlerites show special persistence in holding their positions. After the loss of the enemy, Durchkone operational and tactical importance of Schneidermühl ceased to be paramount for the enemy command. Viktor Georgievich said thoughtfully, destructive effect on morale propaganda which is actively conducted by our political workers. As a consequence, the appearance of defectors. For a long time Viktor Georgievich and I sat at the map, working out for ourselves and for the enemy various variants of military operations, up to the attempt of the enemy garrison to break out of the encirclement. In the evening we were joined by Lieutenant Colonel S.I. Pogori, head of the political department of the 60th Rifle Division, who arrived from the combat order of the units. Sharing his impressions from his meetings with the soldiers and commanders, Pogori thumbed his tattered notebook and mentioned some very curious figures. It turns out that since January 14, 1945, that is, for less than a month of fighting, the party organizations of the 60th Infantry Division received 127 applications from fighters and commanders who wanted to become Bolshevik. During this period, 67 people were accepted as members of the All-Union Communist Party 49 and candidates. As a rule, all applications were discussed in company and battery organizations where they were fought. Characteristically, with the exception of a few isolated cases, all applications were considered in the primary party organizations no later than the second day after their receipt. The political department of the 60th Infantry Division put the main emphasis in its work on admission to the party and Komsomol in infantry units. As a result, 75 of those accepted as members of the All-Union Communist Party and 8 of those accepted as candidates were fighters and officers in the company battalion link. The rapid advancement of the units required considerable efficiency and clarity in the work of the Party Commission. It held its meetings only in the units. The secretary of the Party Commission, communicating with the primary organizations, knew where and how many cases there were to receive. He then notified the members of the Party Commission of the place and time of the meeting. All of them were held in the presence of the majority of its members. At the meeting, the business and political qualities of each person joining the party were actively discussed. If the situation did not allow holding a meeting of the Party Commission during the day, its work continued at night. After returning to the Corps headquarters, I told about the fruitful work of the party organizations of the 60th Infantry Division to the head of the political department of the Corps, Colonel Alexei Ilyich Kolunov. He informed me that a decision had been made, enshrined in the relevant directive to the troops, which required the deployment of communists in battles in such a way that in each unit the party organization had at least 6 or 7 people. This made it possible to cover with party influence all the personnel of platoons and squads, especially rifle squads, to have a communist or Komsomol activist in each calculation of group infantry weapons. February 13 at 10.0. After artillery preparation on specific objects and targets, the Corps formations and units began the assault Schneidemol. Assault groups under cover of fire from infantry escort guns rushed to their assigned objects and broke into them. As a rule, the battle for each object ended with a short hand-to-hand fight. In multi-story buildings, the task of the assault group was to clear the first and basement floors from Hitlerites. The rest was finished by sappers. After the first explosion, the surviving Hitlerites usually stopped resistance and surrendered. The assault group, as a rule, was accompanied by a tank or self-propelled artillery unit, which destroyed the flanking fire points of the Nazis. After capturing the objects, the artillery of the assault group would change its firing positions, move to the captured object, from where it would start firing again, covering the next throw of infantrymen to a new attacked object. During these hours, I visited the attacking order and managed to talk to the commander of one of the assault groups, Lieutenant N. Semen. I and my assault group have already had to participate in a street battle. He shared with me the first impressions. This battle was difficult because in the city is limited maneuverability, narrow like tunnels. Streets constrained our movements, limited visibility. We had to fight for each house, each separate building to smoke the Germans out of basements and attics. Especially intense fights were played out for corner houses or houses facing the square. Having fixed in them, Hitlerites shot the adjacent streets and did not give us the opportunity to approach them. I, together with artillerymen, pulled up the cannon, camouflaged in neighbouring houses and courtyards, firing direct fire only when I saw the target well. Having suppressed an enemy firing point in the middle windows of a building, the infantrymen ran into new pockets of resistance. German machine guns came to life in the corner rooms of all floors. Such cases were observed in large buildings, but it is understandable. because the windows of the corner rooms overlook 2 or even 3 streets and provide the enemy machine gunners a good sector of fire. Therefore, I immediately changed the method of combat. First of all, I opened fire at the corners of the building, destroying the corner rooms. A 3-story house, located on the corner of 2 streets, was blocking the way of the squad, commanded by Sergeant Bradenchuk. When the soldiers came close to it, the Germans opened a barrage of fire. Lines of machine guns and machine guns rattled from windows, attics and doors. The soldier Krez, a guy of short stature, all black from dust and powder cinders, camouflaged behind the trunk of a charred tree, carefully looked at the house. When Hitlerites opened fire on the squad with new force, Krez could not stand it and crawled to the commander of the squad. "Let me finish with them," he said. "Nakisi and you?" asked the sergeant. "I can." "Me. Come on, crawl." And Croesus crawled toward the house on the deep hot sand. He crawled like a dog, wriggling through craters and ditches, and his comrades, who were following him and supporting him with fire, soon saw him slip through the window. And at the same minute the fire from the house stopped, and Emmons started to run out of the door. The men of the squad rushed to the house and quickly seized it. Soldier Krez acted as follows. Having approached the house, immediately threw a grenade into the basement where the enemy soldiers were sitting. Having broken into the room, he destroyed 3 Hitlerites by fire from the automatic rifle and ran to the stairs at the central exit. The Nazis were running from the rooms. With short bursts, he killed 2 more. So, overcoming fierce enemy resistance, our artillerymen, infantrymen, sappers, signalers received invaluable experience in street battles. The assault groups included soldiers from various branches of the army, communists and Komsomol members who, as a rule, received individual assignments, became their cementing force. So, for example, in one of the assault groups, the deputy commander of the 2nd Rifle Battalion, on political part of the 1283rd Rifle Regiment, Senior Lieutenant E.P. Kushnarev gave a party assignment to the communist Rebrov to be the first to rise to the attack when storming the outskirts of the city. Komsomol member Malkov, to hoist the red flag on the first captured building of the city. The soldiers honorably carried out the assignments, and immediately the chain went zipper leaflet, which described how fearlessly and skillfully acted Communist Rebrov and Komsomolets Malkov. Such operational forms of party political work, in battle actively influence the fighters, raise the offensive spirit, help the commander to develop the achieved private success in the overall success, when the capture of one building contributes to the mastery of the whole neighborhood. In the battle for one of the squares of the city, Hitlerites fought especially fiercely. Having strengthened in the big 3-storied building, they were blocking the way of our infantry with machine gun and machine gun fire. To take possession of this building meant to open an exit to the main part of the city. To help the infantrymen in the fight for this building, volunteered candidate for party membership sapper Red Army soldier Grashev. He crawled up to the building at night, planted explosives and destroyed a large part of one of the walls with an explosion, taking advantage of the commotion that arose among the fascists. Our fighters overcame the square with a swift rush and took possession of the building. In street battles, the enemy widely used Faust patrons. Komsomol members initiated the creation of groups to fight against the Faustpunks. In addition, they decided to master this weapon themselves. Such a form of work with the personnel as conversations with the wounded, from which they received valuable and interesting information about the course of the battle. Thus, on February 12, in a conversation with a wounded in the battle for Schniedemo, I found out that many soldiers do not have sufficient experience in street fighting. Red Army soldier Kucherenko, a participant in the battles for Kovel and Warsaw. Shirini fighters climbed to the left side of the house, from where Hitlerites are firing rifle and machine gun fire from windows and cellars, and experienced Red Army men bypass these houses through gardens, vegetable gardens and yards, and successfully knock out Hitlerites from the rear and flank. Some soldiers are advancing. They go along the streets, and the enemy, as a rule, along the streets fires. When summarizing the results of the day, I asked the commanders and political workers to take into account a valuable remark of a Red Army soldier. On the night of February 12-13, employees of the political department of the 60th Infantry Division went to the units that fought in the town of Schmiedimo and together with political officers of the units held talks on the tactics of street fighting. Right on the front line together with the officers of companies and platoons practically showed how to act most expediently in the battle for a given house, street, neighborhood. The same conversations were held with the men of the sapper battalion, who were assigned the combat task of clearing passages for tanks and self-propelled artillery units. During these talks, excellent sappers were popularized, who in previous battles contributed to the success of our troops by their selfless work. The commanders of the units gave high praise and commendation of the actions of the units in which such conversations had been held beforehand, and on the ground practically showed how to act most expediently in the battle for a house, a street, a quarter. The Rifle Battalion of Major L. Stromkin, hero of the Soviet Union, reinforced by tanks and self-propelled artillery guns, for one day of fighting captured several neighborhoods, forming a kind of bridgehead among the fortified enemy territory, which received the name Stromkin's Wedge in the Corps headquarters. I closely followed the growth of Leonid Leonidovich Stromkin's combat skills and was sincerely pleased with his new success. At the end of the war, the major was 23rd year. A representative of the young generation of officers of the Red Army, Stromkin enjoyed authority and love among his fighters. Strict, demanding, but fair. He managed to create a cohesive military team which is highly valued bravery and performance, initiative and mutual assistance, courage and mastery of combat weapons. Major Stromkin has traveled a long way in combat. Even in the battles on the Soch and Dnieper, he showed mature commanding skill, for which he was awarded 2 Orders of the Red Banner. Leonid Leonidovich Stromkin received the high title of Hero of the Soviet Union for successful leadership of the battalion during the forcing of the Vistula and in the battles for the expansion of the bridgehead on the left bank of the river on January 16, 1945, and for the bravery and courage he showed. I had a chance to visit Stromkin's battalion on the eve of the storming of Schneidermall. The commander used the temporary lull not for rest, but for intensive training. The preparation of the battalion units was carried out at the sites of past battles and specially equipped areas. On the eve of the offensive, the political department of the 60th Infantry Division, headed by Lieutenant Colonel A.T. Pogorely in all party and Komsomol organizations, held meeting with the agenda, the tasks of communists and Komsomol members to destroy the encircled German grouping in the fortress town of Schneidermall. In addition, the Politotdelci strictly controlled the placement of assets in each assault group. The results of active, purposeful party political work were reflected during the storming of Schneidermall. Communists and Komsomol members were in the most dangerous places of the battle, performed with great skill and dedication the most difficult and responsible tasks, inspired the fighters to heroic feats. In the critical moments of the battle, they dragged the non-partisan behind them. The actions of Sergeant Sergeyev, the party commander of the 5th Rifle Company of the 2nd Rifle Battalion of the 1285th Rifle Regiment, are indicative in this respect. There were only 18 men left in the company. They formed one assault group. In the Night City battle, the company formed one of the units of the Stromkin Wedge, took possession of the church and the house next to it. On the church, the Partorg Sergeant Sergeyev raised the red flag. By morning, Hitlerites surrounded a handful of our soldiers. Being in detachment from the main forces, the group found itself in a difficult situation. Hitlerites were attacking from all sides. They were more than our soldiers in 5-6 times. The company ran out of ammunition, had no food, and, most importantly, no water. From thirst, the fighters had chapped lips. But among them there was a Communist Party leader, Sergeant Sergeyev, and he was the soul of the fighters, instilled faith in victory in those of them who had already lost hope in the approach of help. Sergeyev set a personal example of fortitude. When Hitler's officer with 2 soldiers tried to penetrate into a window of the house where our soldiers were defending, Sergeyev killed all 3 Hitlerites with a machine gun. 36 hours the company defended in separation from our units and did not surrender either the church or the house to the enemy. During this time, brave men exterminated dozens of Hitlerites. After the storming of Schneidermall, I handed over to the Partorg of the company, Sergeant Sergeyev, the Order of the Red Star. Wonderful examples of courage, steadfastness, selflessness showed the fighters and other party organizers. Party organizer of the 8th Rifle Company, Senior Sergeant Staroverov, enjoyed exceptional authority among the company's personnel. He invariably appeared where there was a threatening situation. When storming the buildings in Schneidermühl, the infantrymen were delayed, and the tankers did not dare to move forward. Partog Senior Sergeant Staroverov, being among the soldiers, noticed it. "Comrades, he addressed the soldiers, our tanks are strong when they are supported by infantry." The soldiers rushed after Staroverov and together with tanks broke into the next street. In the midst of the battle in the company came zipper leaflet, written by the partagome of the battalion. It spoke about the feat of the platoon commander Lieutenant Nikitin, who took command of the company, organized the reflection of 3 enemy counter-attacks. The partour of the company's Staroverov brought the content of the leaflet to all the soldiers. The infantrymen intensified the onslaught and seized another neighborhood. That the communists and Komsomol members were really the soul of the units, and were always in the most dangerous areas, fought without sparing their lives, are evidenced by such. Let's take, for example, the losses of the 1285th Infantry Regiment in the battles for Schneidermühl for one of the most intense days, February 9, 1945. A total of 108 men were killed and wounded, among them 24 communists and 36 Komsomol members. This amounted to about 60 in relation to the total losses for the day. If we take into account that the percentage of communists and Komsomol members in relation to the entire personnel of the regiment did not exceed 10-15, then we can say with good reason that communists and Komsomol members won the victory in the street battles of Schneidermühl with their blood. Speaking at a meeting of the party organization of the headquarters of the 1283rd Rifle Regiment of the orders of Suvorov and Bogdan Kamenetsky, its commander Colonel Kazkov said, "The combat successes of our regiment in the storming of Schneidermühl significantly contributed to the purposeful party political work. Thanks to this, among the personnel always reigned high offensive impulse and determination to fulfill any order." It is on February 13, 1945. The fighting in Schneidermühl did not stop for a minute. They were especially fierce in the area of 2 churches in the center of the city. The Nazis took all measures to hold these important in the defense system strongholds to cover the approaches to the water frontier, and still their resistance could not last long. By 16.0 on February 13, 1945, the key positions of the Hitlerites were occupied by the Corps compounds. Nemes Heights, railway station and workshops, City Park, the area of 2 churches were in our hands. Divisions continued fighting. Advanced detachments forced the river Kudov, cleared from Hitlerites the western part of the fortress, thus compressing even more strongly the ring of encirclement. The enemy's situation became hopeless, and we understood perfectly well that he could make attempts to break out of the encirclement. It was decided, in order to preserve the railroad and airfield nodes, not to hinder these attempts and break through troops destroyed in the field battle. In the evening of February 12, 1945, Colonel Mikhail Karaturnovich Kalashnik, head of the political department of the 47th Army, arrived at the Corps observation post. "So the Military Council of the Army believes," said Mikhail Karaturnovich, "that after our troops have taken possession of Deutsche Krone, there is only one thing left for the garrison of Schneidermühl to capitulate. We decided to further intensify our propaganda work with the enemy garrison. First, tonight we will hold a special program for the surrounded garrison. We will tell about the defeat of the Derech Krenev group of the enemy, involve in the transfer captured soldiers and officers of the garrison of Deutsche Krone. Second, we will hand over a letter from the Military Council of the Army, addressed personally to the commandant of the encircled garrison, outlining the terms of surrender. Third, we will intensify the sending to the surrounded garrison of German soldiers taken prisoner, including those from Deutsche Krone. The enemy listened attentively to the address to the soldiers, but as soon as we began to read the letter of the Military Council of the Army personally to the commandant of the encircled garrison, there was indiscriminate firing. It was carried out, of course, on the orders of the German command, which refused to save the lives of thousands of its soldiers. "My hard-headed bastards, all the same fascist bosses," said to me with bitterness at the new meeting Colonel Kalashnik. "They have no pity for the people." Under the leadership of Mikhail Karaturnovich was developed a specific plan of active propaganda among the enemy troops, surrounded in the fortress city of Schneidermühl. The main goal was to convince German soldiers and officers in the hopelessness of their situation, and hence the senselessness of further resistance. As I learned during the entire period of encirclement, as well as during the street fighting. The garrison of Schneidermühl was subjected to a continuous and concentrated exposure to our propaganda. Almost every night airplanes dropped over the city leaflets addressed specifically to the soldiers and officers of the encircled garrison. Their total circulation amounted to 20,000 copies. In the program of sound transmissions was widely used concrete material, testimony of defectors and prisoners. For example, from the testimony of defectors was revealed the fact that the garrison commandant Reschlinger's own shooting of several soldiers. Near the gas plant lie 2 dead German soldiers, reported in the program. To the chest of one of them pinned a piece of paper with the inscription, "These 2 soldiers shot by me. I will do the same to anyone who runs away from the battlefield. Bestem Bannführer Reschlinger." POWs, especially defectors, were widely involved in broadcasting to their troops. Such operational work produced positive results. Under the influence of their speeches increased the influx of German soldiers who surrendered as prisoners of war. Hitler's command rejected the call of the Military Council of the 47th Army for unconditional surrender of the garrison. It was time for the cannons to speak again. So on the night of February 14, 1945, the units and formations of the 125th Rifle Corps regrouped, and in the morning continued the offensive from the southern direction in order to completely eliminate the garrison of the fortress by the end of the day. The northern and northeastern directions were covered by small outposts of the 185th Infantry Division. In the depth and on the edge of the forest were prepared and occupied by troops cut-off positions. At night, a part of the enemy garrison tried to break the encirclement, and for this purpose at 1:30 on February 14, 1945, Hitlerites opened a hurricane fire on the front line of the units of the 280th Infantry Regiment in the area of the peninsula. Another group concentrated on the road Schneidermühl-Lebenka. With the support of 10-12 tanks, Hitlerites, on a narrow section broke through the defense of the Rifle Battalion, defending on a wide front, but they failed to break out of the encirclement. In the field battle, Hitlerites were destroyed by parts of the 3rd Shock Army and parts of the 1st Army of Polish Army, which were in the front reserve. Hitler's garrison of the fortress city of Schneidermühl, by 11:30 on February 14, 1945, ceased to exist. The fortress city was cleared of fascists. The order of the commander of the 1st Belarusian Front, Marshal of the Soviet Union G. Zyukhov, the compounds of the 125th Rifle Corps fulfilled exactly in the time specified by him. For the exemplary performance of combat missions of the command, for valor and courage, shown during the storming of an important communications hub and a powerful stronghold of the Hitlerites' defense in the eastern part of Pomerania, the order of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief of February 14, 1945, the troops who participated in the battles for the capture of the town of Schneidermühl announced a commendation. The 1,281st Rifle Regiment of the Order of Alexander Nevsky was awarded the Order of Kutuzov, II degree. The 1,283rd Rifle Regiment of the Order of Suvorov was awarded the Order of Bogdan Khmelnytsky, II degree. The 1,285th Rifle Regiment of Prague was awarded the Order of the Red Banner. The 969th Artillery Regiment of Prague was awarded the Order of Alexander Nevsky. Since the experience of battles of the 60th, 76th and 175th Infantry Divisions in the towns of Deutsch-Cologne and Schneidermühl confirmed the expediency of creating and training assault groups. Of rule, they were composed of 1 rifle company, 50 riflemen, 3 5 sappers, 2 machine gun crews, 8 12 guns from 45 m to 122 m, 4 6 battalion or regimental mortars, 2 3 flamethrowers, 2 3 tanks or self-propelled artillery units. The nature of the battle in a populated area with stone buildings required the division of assault groups into smaller groups with mandatory reinforcement with guns. Often assault groups were divided in half, advancing along parallel streets running in the direction of the main object of attack. To storm individual houses and suppress pockets of resistance, these groups were split into even smaller groups and attacked objects from different directions with extensive use of guns and saw. This method was successful in destroying buildings and destroying enemy firing points in buildings, clearing the enemy from house after house, block after block. The parallel movement of the 2 main groups provided assistance to the lagging groups by the impact of neighboring groups that advanced forward in the flank and rear of the defending enemy. Of particular importance in urban battles were bypasses through yards and streets. surprise attacks of the enemy. Successful advancement of assault groups sometimes depended on the combat skill of each fighter. From February 16 to 20, the enemy from the area of Altdammer and Stargard struck in the general direction of Landerberg. He managed to push the 47th Army to the south by 812 km. The enemy managed to retake the towns of Piritz, Span and other settlements. On March 2, the 125th Infantry Corps, having made a march to the Oder, began fights on liquidation of the Altdam group of Hitlerites. In heavy battles, the military corps showed examples of bravery and high martial skill. On March 3, 1945, advancing in the infantry fighting order, the gun commander of the 4th Battery of the 373rd Artillery Regiment, Sergeant A. Bulmagin, destroyed 3 machine guns, 20 Hitlerites and 2 enemy observation posts by direct fire, which contributed to the success of the battles for the city of Barn. Continuing the offensive, on the same day on the outskirts of Luben, the brave artillerymen destroyed 2 75 mm guns of the enemy by direct fire, dispersed and partially destroyed up to a platoon of infantry. During the battle, the commander of the firing platoon was wounded. Sergeant Bulmagin replaced him and successfully continued the battle. By the decree of the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR, Sergeant F.A. Bulmagin was awarded the Order of Glory, First Class, for his courage and personal bravery in battle. In the area of Altdammer, Hitlerites tried to shoot down our rifle company from the height of 420, taken the day before. In the morning, after a strong artillery and mortar preparation supported by airstrikes, the enemy counterattacks began. Sergeant M. Ryatsenko, the company's party leader, told the men, "We have nowhere to retreat, we have only one way, forward, to defeat the enemy." And the first went forward to meet the counterattacking enemy. Yatsenko dragged the men of the company after him. He destroyed 7 Hitlerites with grenades. The counterattack of the enemy was repulsed. The Order of Bogdan Kamenetsky of the II degree decorated the breast of the party. In fierce battles on defeat of the Pomeranian grouping of the enemy, the corps compounds suffered considerable losses. No one is insured from death in the war, neither an ordinary soldier nor a general. We will never forget the bitterness of the loss of the combat commander of the 60th Infantry Division, hero of the Soviet Union, Major General Chernov EVG. That day I arrived at the division CP and first of all asked Viktor Georgievich whether his new observation post was ready, from which I wanted to get acquainted with the Hitlerites' defense southeast of Altdam. "The observation post is not ready yet, but lunch is ready," smiled the general. "Let's have lunch together, Andrei Matveyevich, and then we'll go to the observation post. The sappers are already finishing its equipment." Viktor Georgievich soon cordially invited them to a table set up in the secure basement of a stone house with a small window in the strong wall. "No, not here," the general said as soon as I took a chair. "Sit down according to Russian custom in the red corner." In the red corner, so in the red corner, I did not object, moving to the wall, curtained with a soldier's cloak tent. But we did not manage to have lunch. A bursting shell rumbled near the house. A blast wave hit the window, which looked like an embrasure with a tight jet. General Chernov at the same moment powerlessly lowered his head. A raindrop of blood caked on his temple, a trace of a tiny shrapnel. On the day of funeral of Major General V.G. Chernov on March 20, 1945, his name was last heard in the order of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief No. 304, thanking the 60th Infantry Sevsko-Varshavskaya Red Banner Order of Suvorov Division, which distinguished itself in the battles to defeat the Pomeranian grouping of the Nazis. Its 1,281st and 1,285th Rifle Regiments were awarded the Order of Suvorov I degree, and the 1,283rd Rifle Regiment was given the honorary name of Pomeranian. Almost 40 years later, in the Moscow Palace of Pioneers and Schoolchildren, at the meeting of veterans of the 1st Division of the People's Militia of the Lenin district of the capital with young people, we again recalled the fiery roads of the war from Moscow to Berlin. For 10 years, the members of the Military Patriotic Club Search, students of the Trade and Economic Technical School, located in the Leninsky district of the capital, have been following the heroic battle path of the People's Militia Division. This coincidence is symbolic and justified. It is justified by the great search work done by the club. Under the guidance of the military instructor of the technical school, Lieutenant Colonel Reserve Z. Galutin organized correspondence with 500 veterans of the division, but before thousands of requests were sent to all ends of the country, created a museum of military glory, but before the students studied a lot of historical documents, held conversations with living witnesses of the heroic past of the Red Banner connection. Where are you now, fellow soldiers? Was the name of the meeting of courageous defenders of the motherland with the grateful youth of Moscow, a meeting of fellow soldiers who had not seen each other for dozens of post-war years? They arrived about 300 people from all corners of the USSR. The Palace of Pioneers and Schoolchildren became the place of strong embrace of grey-haired veterans. 35 years later met frontline soldiers D. Samodurov and P. Kotsuba, who served in the same rifle regiment. In the same amount of time found the battle orders D. Leshchev V.V. Francisov A. Prikodko, at one time not received by them. Many heroic pages of the combat past of the glorious compound helped to reveal the meeting organized by Search. The joy of the frontline soldiers is touching. In his letter to the students of the technical school, former sapper Prikodko mentioned the deputy commander of the sapper battalion E. Greenberg, wrote that very much. C. Greenberg wrote that he really wanted to meet with him, and here in front of the crowded hall of the Palace of Pioneers and Schoolchildren combat commander hugged his best sapper and congratulated him on his award, the Order of Patriotic War II degree. Thanks to the club's activities, 15 state awards were presented to veterans of the division for their combat services in the Great Patriotic War. Having handed over to my former subordinates the orders and medals long sought for them, I could not but remember the words of the former commander of the 60th Rifle Division, Major General Viktor Georgievich Chernov, said shortly before his death in March 1945 on the bank of the Oder. It is worth to be born, to live, to work, to fight and to die only for the sake of the motherland's health. A minute of silence honoured the light memory of the fallen. From the hushed hall looked at the veterans, representatives of the younger generation, worthy of their fathers and grandfathers. And again the stories about the feats were heard, and the heroes came on stage, and the youth applauded them. The youth carried the veterans' experience as a sacred thing. The successful completion of the East Pomeranian operation thwarted Hitler's plans to strike a flank blow to the Soviet troops, which had reached the Oder, and allowed to transfer 11 released armies for the Berlin operation. After the defeat of the Nazi grouping in the Altdammer area in the 20th days of March 1945, the 125th Rifle Corps in the 60th, 76th and 175th Rifle Divisions was withdrawn to the 2nd Echelon of the 47th Army and concentrated in the areas of Salina, the forest west of Wattenberg and Wartnitz.
Before the Red Army compounds, which reached the right bank of the Oder, the command set the task to adequately prepare for the storming of the Nazi lair, the city of Berlin.
During these days, combat and political training in the corps units was carried out day and night for 12 hours a day. Second combat training of corps units and subdivisions was conducted in places where the battles had just died down, and in specially equipped towns and assault strips. Separate groups of officers and the entire officer and non-commissioned officer staff of the assault battalions made field trips to the areas most indicative in tactical terms of the conducted offensive battles. The main method of training in the Link single fighter, squad, platoon, company, battery, were tactical and formation exercises, where tactical and firing techniques were polished element by element, with sergeants and officers additionally on the terrain, most appropriate to the area of the upcoming battles, were conducted tactical fire-flying exercises.
By April 12, 1945, the program of combat and political training was completed. During the inspections conducted by the command and headquarters of the Corps, it was found that the personnel of the units were well prepared and the units were ready for the upcoming offensive.
As you know, from April 5 to 7, 1945, in the headquarters of the commander of the 1st Belarusian Front held a staff game on maps and a model of Berlin. It was attended by the command of the 47th Army, worked offensive troops in the Berlin direction. After the meeting and the team game at Marshal of the Soviet Union G.K. Zhukov, General Perkorovich General Perkorovich held a training session at the headquarters of our army, where he acquainted us with the tasks assigned to the 47th Army in the Berlin Operin, advancing on the right flank of the strike group to break through the enemy's defences at the site of Karaspai's Ortwig, to destroy in cooperation with neighbours the 3rd Shock Army on the left and the 1st Army of the Polish Army on the right, the Nazis in the main line of defense and seize the port of Ritzen, VV, Kunersdorf, later to bypass Berlin from the north, and on the 11th day of the operation to reach the Elbe in its strip, to strike the main blow on the front of Karaspi's Ortwitz. The operational structure of the arm. All course in line. The combat order of rifle corps in 2 echelons, the combat order of rifle divisions deeply echeloned. The 125th Rifle Corps, with reinforcement units, in the center of the operational formation of the troops of the 47th Army. It is advancing in the direction of New Levin, Teringswerde, for the immediate task, to break through the enemy defense on the front of the bend of the canal southeast of Gizkov-Berine, Narina, in cooperation with the 129th Rifle Corps, to destroy the opposing enemy and seize the line of the railroad from the platform Teringswerde to the railroad bridge over the Volsine River. Subsequent task, in cooperation with the 77th Rifle Corps, to seize the area of Ritzen and go to the front of Frankfurter, Viv, and a strong forward detachment to seize the area of height 127.1. In the future, by the end of the second day of the offensive, to reach the front of Saar Lake. The main blow to strike the left flank, in the first echelon 2 infantry divisions and in the second 1 infantry division. Artillery density, not less than 300 barrels per 1 kilometre of the front. After a meeting at the headquarters of the 47th Army on April 9 and 10, 1945, I spent with the command of the 125th Infantry Corps reconnaissance of the areas of crossings and terrain in the band of the upcoming hostilities. I was accompanied by the Corps Artillery Commander Colonel N.A. Maikev, Corps Engineer Lieutenant Colonel I.S. Kornev, the head of the Corps Operational Department Lieutenant Colonel F. Colonel F.K. Eremin, the Corps Intelligence Chief Lieutenant Colonel F.G. Delev. Then we thoroughly discussed all the issues of the upcoming offensive, made preliminary decisions. April 11. The same reconnaissance was held with the commanders of rifle divisions, chiefs of services and branches of troops. After the reconnaissance, we made the following conclusions. Upcoming combat corps compounds should develop on the hilly Brandenburg Plain. There are many lakes which in some places adjacent to each other. They are turned into natural frontiers for defense front to the east. And a large number of canals make it easier for the enemy to organize defense at intermediate lines. A well-developed network of highways and dirt roads, hidden from observation by trees, provides covert maneuvering of reserves. In the depth of the enemy's defense is a plain, sharply rugged with various heights and woodlands. The terrain occupied by our troops is completely open. Individual buildings are well shot by the enemy and, due to the configuration of the leading edge, are viewed from all sides and cannot serve as a shelter. Deep and wide drainage canals prevent the rapid movement of artillery, tanks, and self-propelled artillery. Groundwater close to the surface makes it impossible to entrench, equip firing positions, and build shelters. The inability to entrench puts the early concentration of troops at great risk. Thus, the terrain in the strip of our offensive favors the defenders and is extremely unfavorable for the offensive. According to ground and air reconnaissance, the enemy has done everything possible to exploit local conditions. Natural boundaries, road junctions, heights, rivers, canals, lakes, ditches and narrow defiles, and especially large and small settlements, Hitlerites turned into strong strongholds, adapted to a circular defense with a developed system of trenches and communication lines.
The enemy paid special attention to the strengthening of the main defence strip on the section Alti-Oder, Frankfurt am Oder, against our Oder bridgehead. It consisted of 3 positions. Each position consisted of 2 or 3 full-profile trenches with a developed network of communication lines, equipped as cut-off positions and intermediate lines. All positions, and especially the main strip, were built anti-tank.
They were covered by powerful artillery fire and minefields. Ahead of the first trenches, at intersections and roadsides, dug well-equipped cells for soldiers armed with false patrons. The average density of mines on the most important directions reached 2,000 mines and more per 1 kilometre of the front. Before the trenches of the front line, wire barriers in several rows, reinforced with spiral Bruno and low visibility obstacles. Hitler's rulers made a last attempt to delay the end of the war, which meant the collapse of the fascist regime. Our soldiers, sergeants and officers had to fight the last, but also the most difficult battle of the Great Patriotic War. They countered the powerful fortifications of the enemy with indomitable fortitude, increased combat power and high military skill. To Berlin. These words inspired everyone, from the ordinary soldier to the general.
The main efforts in party political work were aimed at ensuring high morale, offensive impulse in the troops. We prepared the personnel for heavy fighting, instilled in them that the defeat of the Berlin grouping, the capture of the capital of Nazi Germany, will lead to complete victory. In these days, the newspaper of the 60th Infantry Division wrote that the approaching great victory will be an act of the greatest justice.
The same issue contains a statement at one of the rallies of Red Army man Nikolaev from the 128th Independent Signal Battalion. I am inexpressibly glad that I have passed the German soil all the way to Berlin. I don't want to sleep neither day nor night. In these historic days, I want to work so that to provide excellent communication, the fastest advance to the center of the fascist lair and myself to hoist the victory banner over Berlin. The work of commanders and political workers, aimed at revealing the beastly essence of fascisms, contributed to the education of hatred of the enemy. Even near Warsaw, the workers of political departments of divisions paid much attention to the stories about Hitler's atrocities in Majdanek. Political bodies organized excursions to the death camp. From each unit went there a few people. On the return of officers and soldiers from the concentration camp in the units held rallies. In the divisional newspapers appeared articles with eyewitness accounts of those who had been to this factory of extermination of people. Near Schneidermall, soldiers of one of the regiments of the 60th Infantry Division found 22 corpses of tortured Red Army soldiers in the courtyard of a German village. A part of them was burnt, and the rest, apparently, Hitlerites did not have time to destroy. Our rapid offensive interfered. The regiment at that time was on the march. Therefore, political workers together with commanders decided to hold a rally right at the scene of the Nazi crime. At a short rally spoke Lieutenant Ponol Pomatilov, the regiment's Pater Kirishenko, and some soldiers. They swore to take revenge in battle on Hitler's scoundrels for all their atrocities. In these April days before the beginning of the offensive, we used the most various forms of educational work among the personnel. So, in the first days of April 1945, in a solemn atmosphere in front of the formation, was read the decree of the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR and awarded the 60th Infantry Division Sevsko-Varshavskaya Government Awards, the Order of the Red Banner and the Order of Suvorov I degree, which it was awarded in the past battles.
Having congratulated all the personnel of the division with deserved high awards of the motherland, I wished them new combat successes in the upcoming final battles with the German invaders.
Then I fulfilled another pleasant assignment. I presented the Order of Lenin and the Medal Gold Star to the hero of the Soviet Union, to Vladimir Vasilievich Mylnikov, the commander of the 3rd Division of the 969th Artillery Regiment of the Prague Order of Alexander Nevsky. After the awards presentation, there was a solemn march parade of the division personnel. The soldiers and officers passed by the glorious battle banners of regiments and division with a strict, clear step. Heroes of the Soviet Union, holders of the Order of Lenin, Red Banner and Glory stood in front of the battle relics. After the end of the parade, a fighter from the new replenishment Red Army man Aukštoni, a Lithuanian by nationality, from the 4th Rifle Company of the 1281st Rifle Regiment of the Prague Red Banner, Order of Suvorov, wrote in the division newspaper, "I am a young warrior, for the first time got into a frontline situation, but I see that I am in a fighting division, which today received 2 high government awards. I promise that I will master military science well, and in the upcoming battles, together with my comrades in arms and old soldiers, I will take revenge on Hitler's barbarians for the atrocities they have committed. We, Lithuanian soldiers, will not shame the banners of the Red Army, blessed with battle glory." Battle banners. How much mobilizing, calling to the feat of arms there is in their scarlet flame. In difficult moments of battle they appeared among the soldiers. On the eve of the breakthrough of the Hitlerites' defense east of Stargard in March 1945, the commander of the 1281st Infantry Regiment of the Orders of Kutuzov and Alexander Nevsky, Lieutenant Colonel Timofey Afanasyevich Dolbonosov, holder of 6 orders, knelt down in front of the regiment at the unfurled battle banner and loudly said, so that every soldier heard, "I mercilessly swear to beat the enemy, to honorably fulfill my duty to the motherland." This oath after the regiment commander was repeated by all Red Army soldiers, sergeants and officers. The personnel of the regiment in the offensive brilliantly fulfilled the combat task, and its battle banner was crowned with another award, the Order of Suvorov, i.e. degree, and all the soldiers and commanders of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief declared gratitude.
In the critical moments of the battle, the commander of the 1,283rd Infantry Regiment of the Orders of Suvorov and Bogdan Khmelnytsky, Lieutenant Colonel. Kiriv walked with the unfurled battle banner through the trenches of the battalions of the 1st Echelon and called on the soldiers to fulfill their military duty.
The sight of the battle banner, Orders of Suvorov and Bogdan Khmelnytsky inspired the soldiers. They managed to break through the enemy's defense. In memory of their heroism, the regiment received the honorable name of Pomeranian. By orders of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief from March 4, 1945, and from March 20, 1945, the personnel of the 1,283rd Rifle Regiment were commended for their excellent fighting. So on April 13, 1945, the units of the 125th Rifle Corps were ordered to march to the Oder and cross to the bridgehead. Thanks to the precise work of engineering and Sperry units, the crossing took place quickly and in an organized manner. Rifle regiments, under the cover of night, concentrated in the forest near the Oder northwest of Zelen. Bridgehead. In this word usually put the meaning, a large space with good access and hidden paths. There was none of this on our so-called bridgehead, and therefore we called it a patch in our heel, where the corps occupied no more than 4 square kilometers. The 60th Infantry Division, right flanking 1st Echelon in the front, received a breakthrough sight 1,100 meters, and left flanking 175th Infantry Division, up to 900 meters. On the patch was to be placed in strict fighting and firing order divisions, regiments, battalions, divisions, companies, batteries, command and observation posts from the Rifle Corps to the company. Batteries, centers of battle control, attached and supporting formations and units, thousands of men, guns, mortars, tanks, self-propelled artillery, tractors and vehicles, in addition, had to be hidden from the eyes of the enemy. In front of the 125th Rifle Corps, the enemy at night kept his main forces in the 1st and 2nd trenches. During daylight hours he left only observers. The main forces were withdrawn to rest in shelters. The withdrawal of units to the shelters and their withdrawal to the trenches of the first line was made in the morning. Hitlerites, feeling the approach of our offensive, during the day of the 15th and the night of April 16 along the front, and in the depth of the defense shifted their battle orders to the north, then to the south, then to the east, then to the west, to the frontier of Ritzen. Many itinerant artillery and mortar batteries appeared. These deceptive movements of combat orders in the main strip of enemy defenses for us, the fighters of the front line, were understandable. The enemy was doing everything to somehow hide from our expected fire attack.
Already after the victory at a press conference on June 9, 1945, Marshal of the Soviet Union G.K. Zhukov will say, "The Germans expected our blow. Therefore, assuming that they were expecting our strike in the Berlin direction, we thought for a long time about how to organize it suddenly for the enemy."
In order to present the German surprise on a large scale, I, as commander, chose the method of a surprise attack at night the entire front. First of all, we made a night artillery preparation, which, according to the testimony of the prisoners, the Germans did not expect. They assumed that we would probably operate at night, but did not think that this would be the main attack. Following the artillery preparation, we carried out a night tank attack. In this attack, we threw more than 4,000 tanks supported by 22,000 barrels of artillery and mortars. From the airstrike was accompanied by 4,000 or 5,000 airplanes, which began to operate at night. To help the tanks in orientation at night, we applied no one conducted until now night illumination by searchlights. Says she Tenti Gilvinus. By using this novelty, we meant not only to illuminate our tanks and infantrymen, but also to blind the enemy so that he could not fire accurately. And this was the intention of the commander of the 1st Belarusian Front. In the same hours of waiting together with other compounds were actively preparing for its realization soldiers and our 125th Rifle Corps. At 20 hours 30 minutes on April 15, 1945, I reported to the commander of the 47th Army, Lieutenant General F.I. Perovich, about the readiness to carry out the combat task. I am often asked, tell me, what did you experience during the unique time of the storming of Berlin? The interest of young people who grew up after the war is quite understandable. They are looking for and will persistently search for what notes the frontline soldiers left in diaries, letters, articles, books, orders, reports, and bulletins. They will look for an answer to what we, their grandfathers, fathers, and mothers, were thinking at this historic, glorious hour. As one of the participants of the final battle against fascism, the pinnacle of the Soviet military art, which absorbed all the best that had been acquired during the hard 4-year struggle against Hitler's army, I want to answer this question with the words of ordinary participants of the battles of those unforgettable days. Red Army man of the 1st Machine Gun Company of the 1285th Rifle Regiment of the 60th Rifle Division of the Prague Red Banner, Order of Suvorov Regiment, Yushchenko said before the battle. Now we have been read the address of the Military Council of the First Belarusian Front. The hour of the last retribution to Hitler's barbarians for their atrocities and crimes has come. The strength of the Red Army is great and mighty, and this strength, which we carry, we will mercilessly bring down on the enemy's head. We will fulfill the order of the mother. In 2 hours we will go forward to victory. Red Army man Kuznetsov, from the 5th Company of the 2nd Rifle Battalion of the 2nd Rifle Battalion of the 216th Rifle Regiment of the 76th Rifle Division. I am glad that I lived to see this historic day, when we are embarking on a decisive assault on Berlin. I will not spare my strength and life and fulfill the combat order. Heavily wounded in the first battles of the battle, a petty officer of a machine gun company of the 277th Rifle Karelian Red Banner Karelian, Order of Suvorov Regiment of the 175th Rifle Division, a member of the All-Union Volunteer Army, Rakimbayev sighs. It's not a pity that I was wounded, but it's a pity that I didn't make it to Berlin. Ivan Zakharovich Zeldin, a Red Army soldier of the 6th Company of the 278th Revda Regiment of the 175th Rifle Division, Order of Suvorov and Kutuzov, echoed his, I am very sorry that I was wounded. I would still like to take revenge on the Germans because they killed my 2 sons. We can continue to cite the statements of the heroes of the Battle of Berlin, all of them in those memorable hours before our decisive attack on the lair of the Nazi beast thought about the motherland, about the fulfillment of sacred duty to her. And it is not by chance that on the historic night of April 16, 1945, the party organizations of the First Belarusian Front received more than 2,000 applications from fighters and commanders who decided to go into battle as communists. The party and Komsomol accepted former frontline soldiers who had distinguished themselves in battles with the Nazi invaders. Before the beginning of the Berlin operation, at the meeting of the primary party organization of the 3rd Division of the 969th Artillery Prague Order of Alexander Nevsky Regiment, was accepted as a member of the All-Union Communist Party of Communism, and the commander of the gun of this division, Kazakh Sergeant Musamim Bekshigitov, as especially distinguished in battles with the Germans in the towns of Schneidermühl and Altdam. During liquidation of the enemy bridgehead on the right bank of the Oder, his gun was on direct aim and shot fascists at point-blank range. On March 15, 1945, Beksigitov's calculation, together with gunners, repulsed 3 counterattacks of the enemy and at the same time hit 2 self-propelled guns and destroyed more than 15 Hitlerites. I ask the primary party organization of the 3rd Division to accept me as a member of the All-Union Communist Party, as I want to be a member of the party that leads us to complete victory over the enemy. In the final battles, I will spare no effort, and if necessary, and life, to fulfill any combat order of the command. I will justify the title of party member in the battles with honor. On the night of April 16, 1945, the gunner of a 120 ME mortar battery of the 1281st Rifle Regiment, hero of the Soviet Union, Junior Sergeant Peter Petrovich Shlyakturov, was accepted as a candidate for membership in the All-Union Communist Party of Bolsheviks. The same night, the assistant to the chief of the political department of the 60th Rifle Division on the Komsomol, Captain Grab, handed Komsomol tickets Red Army 1285th Rifle Regiment Sakarsky, Sergeant Mishagin, Junior Lieutenant Shepkasov, and others. Receiving the ticket, the commander of the rifle squad, Fyodor Mishagin, said, I am glad that I receive a Komsomol ticket in such decisive battles with the Nazis. I will fight so that, together with my comrades, to be the first to come to Berlin and hoist the victory banner. Komsomolets Mishagin kept his word. After the artillery preparation on April 16, 1945, Michigan was the first to rise to the attack and boldly went forward, leading the squad. In this battle, he killed 3 Hitlerites with a machine gun. When the enemy undertook a counterattack, Michigan told his men, "Not a step back. It is better to die than to give up the occupied line. We will hope." And they held out.
Junior Lieutenant Chepkasov, the commander of the rifle platoon of the 7th Rifle Company of the 1283rd Rifle Regiment, also received a Komsomol ticket. He earned a high rank, Komsomolets. In the battles for New Levin, Chepkasov was the first to raise his platoon to the attack, inspired the soldiers by his personal example. Being wounded, the platoon commander remained in the line.
The issues of growth of the party and Komsomol ranks were always in the center of attention of the political departments of the corps and divisions. By the beginning of the Berlin Operation Party and Komsomol organizations were established in all rifle companies and all this was extremely important in increasing the combat effectiveness of units and formations. April 16 at 5 a.m., shuddered and groaned the land behind the Oder. All artillery corps, army and front opened fire at the same time strictly according to the intended plan. It was conducted on previously shot targets. Now 47th Army broke through the enemy defense at a front of 4.3 kilometers. In the artillery preparation involved 20 artillery regiments, 3 artillery brigades, 7 mortar regiments, 2 regiments and a brigade of guards mortars, 5 self-propelled artillery regiments. In all, about 300 barrels per 1 kilometer of front. For each gun, there were 3 sets of ammunition. For each mortar, 4. Such a thing had never happened in the whole war. The enemy positions were drowned in a sea of fire. The air was filled with a continuous hum. Most of the enemy's firing points at the first position were suppressed. The stronghold in New Levin was destroyed by 90%. Hitlerites in the 3rd and 4th trenches of the first position could not provide organized resistance. Part of the German soldiers, who were in deep stone cellars, was so morally suppressed that did not offer any resistance. In some sections of the breakthrough, there were 2-3 broken machine guns, 4-5 destroyed machine gun emplacements, and 5-7 direct hits in the trenches per 100 meters along. Here is what the prisoners of the Bayer Infantry Regiment of the 606th Infantry Division Special Forces testified about the effectiveness of the artillery preparation. Our company had 4 machine guns, but when the Russians rose to the attack, not a single machine gun worked. It turned out that 3 machine guns were broken, and the 4th had its servants destroyed. I have had to test the strength of Russian artillery more than once, but I have never seen the like of what happened on April 16, 1945. The fire of the Russian artillery made a stunning impression on the soldiers. The non-commissioned officers could not get us to follow even the simplest orders. All the soldiers seemed to have lost their minds, although most of them had participated in battles more than once. During the artillery raid, some hid in dugouts, others lay face down in the trenches and prayed to God, and only with the beginning of the Russian attack officers at gunpoint forced us out of hiding. The Russian infantry had already appeared in our trenches. For 25 minutes, the fire barrage raged over the Hitlerite positions. 5 minutes before the end of the last artillery raid, the infantry began to advance to the front edge of the enemy's defense. On the site of the 175th Infantry Division, the infantry came close to the bursts of their shells and 2 minutes before the end of the last fire raid demanded the transfer of fire to the first line of the firing rampart.
At 5:25 on the signal of green rockets, the infantrymen made a rush. 6 reinforced assault battalions and 2 separate rifle army companies attacked simultaneously.
The soldiers of the 60th and 175th Infantry Divisions attacked in a friendly, organized, confidently managed by the heroes of close combat, platoon, company and battalion commanders. Assault battalions of the rifle regiments, clinging to the firing rampart, relentlessly overcame the first 2 lines of enemy trenches running along the railroad bed from the station New Levin to the height of 6.5. They successfully acted on the eastern edge and in the center of the stronghold of New Levin, not slowing down the pace of the attack and not lagging behind the firing rampart. Clinging to its brakes, the soldiers swept over the Stadtgraben Canal running through the center of New Levin. Of the surviving enemy firing points were coming to life. The enemy on the opposite bank of the Stat grab and drop stubbornly resisted, trying to stop our advance. In the air appeared Messrs. Focke-Wulfs, but soon they were driven back by our fighters. When at dawn on April 16, 1945, the units of the 175th Infantry Division captured the third line of trenches of the first position of the main line of the enemy's defence southeast of New Leven, they unexpectedly met desperate resistance of the Nazis at the Stadgraben Canal, the opposite bank of which was strongly fortified. The commander of the 334th Guards Heavy Self-Propelled Artillery, Upper Dniprovsk Red Banner Regiment, Guards Lieutenant Colonel Fyodor Alexandrovich Goroshchenko, deployed his batteries almost at the edge of the canal and in cooperation with the artillerymen, and mortars from close range began to shoot the enemy defending the opposite bank. The infantry of the assault battalions, under cover of artillery and mortar fire on boats and swimming on improvised means found here at the canal, crossed to the opposite bank of the canal and seized the fourth trench of the first position of the enemy's main line of defence. As always, in the first ranks of the attackers were communists. During the Great Patriotic War, I had to work and meet many Bolsheviks of Leninist temperament, including political workers of various ranks. However, I especially remembered the methods and style of work of Lieutenant Colonel Sergei Pavlovich Pogory, head of the political department of the 60th Infantry Division. A communist since 1930, the war made him a political officer by vocation.
Before the war, he was on party work, constantly and closely connected with people. This helped Sergei Pavlovich quickly enter the army family. He practically mastered and learned the work of a company political officer, senior instructor of propaganda and agitation of the political department of the division, deputy chief of the political department of the division, chief of the political department of a separate ski brigade. In November 1943, he became the head of the political department of the 60th Infantry Division.
Sergei Pavlovich was able to see in small things big, not to lose the main thing behind the particularity. He considered equally important political support of the combat guard and breaking the main line of enemy defences, dissuading troops, providing ammunition, work with the wounded, the placement of party and Komsomol cadres, preparation for the attack of assault battalions. These areas were constantly in the centre of his attention. He had his own approach to each fighter, and people believed their head of the political department of the division followed him.
Coming to the 60th Rifle, I felt the need to meet with Pogory. In conversations with him, opened a wide panorama of life of people in the war, recognized their needs and concerns. It often happened that Lieutenant Colonel was not in the political department and division headquarters for a long time. He was sent to look for him. They would find him and bring him to the division headquarters.
"Sit down, Sergei Pavlovich, I told him. We need to exchange thoughts." Then somehow it turned out by itself that Pogory shared his thoughts about the nature of the fighting, about the mood of fighters and officers, and I turned into an interested listener. The head of the political department considered it his duty, first of all, to talk about the shortcomings that hindered the common cause. It was party criticism, not unpleasant, but necessary to live cleaner, to work better. I met people who could speak beautifully at meetings and sittings, but speaking correctly and beautifully is not everything. The main thing is to be able to confirm words with deeds and actions. Nochpodiv 60 confirmed them every day, so it happened today, on April 16, 1945, when the battle for New Leven broke out. The head of the division's political department, Lieutenant Colonel SSB Pogory, and the division commander, Colonel G.S. Ivanov, being at the division's MP, well understood. If the pace of the attack in the centre of the division's combat order would slow down, and everything was going to this very thing. In the stereo tube was perfectly visible as one, then the second fighter stopped, lay down a squad, platoon. The rampart of fire returned. Anxious became on the heart of the commander. The head of the political department of the division took off the soldier's helmet, hanging on a nail. Soon he appeared exactly where the rifle chain lay low. Suddenly everything changed on the battlefield. The soldiers rose to the attack. Fire shaft went forward. Hitlerites pushed back to the west, and in other areas tried to gain a foothold on the opposite bank of the canal, using a favourable outline of the bank and pre-prepared positions. They stopped another rifle battalion, whose flank was covered by a machine gun platoon under the command of Junior Lieutenant Grishchenko. The young officer made a bold decision. By the fire of machine guns from the front, he pinned the enemy to the ground, and 4 soldiers, with grenades, crossed unnoticed through the canal on the left flank of the Nazis, and 2 more fighters crossed on their right flank. Hitlerites did not notice this maneuver. Their attention was distracted by actions from the front. In 20 minutes, grenades flew into Hitlerites from the flank.
Suddenness of the attack of machine gunners caused panic in the ranks of the enemy. The soldiers of the battalion crossed the canal and continued the attack. As a result of brave, active actions and reasonable initiative of Junior Lieutenant Grishchenko, 13 men were taken prisoner. Up to 20 killed and wounded remained on the battlefield. The rest fled in panic.
The commander of the assault battalion of the 277th Rifle Regiment, Major St. Orlov, used the initiative of the machine gun platoon commander Junior Lieutenant Grishchenko. On the shoulders of the repulsed enemy, the battalion captured the 4th enemy trench on the opposite bank of the Stadtgraben Canal. Hitlerites, worried about brave and decisive actions of the assault battalion of the 277th Rifle Regiment, concentrated on the northwestern outskirts of Alt-Levin, reinforced by tanks and self-propelled guns units of the Infantry Regiment Petre. As a result of their counterattack, the soldiers of the 277th Infantry Regiment were pinned to the canal. Without artillery support, their position became critical. The tense rhythm of the battle required the commander of the 277th Infantry Karelian Red Banner Regiment to make quick decisions, thanks to which the initiative could again pass into the hands of the offensive. From the regiment's observation point, Major Arkady Karlovich Shmygun saw well the actions of the advanced assault battalion. Experienced front man, awarded the Order of the Red Banner and Suvorov Fury degree, was able to correctly assess the situation. He rushed to the crossing, the construction of which had slowed down under enemy fire. Together with the first guns, he crossed to the opposite bank. The appearance of the regimental commander, his personal bravery, inspired the soldiers. The battalion resisted, reflected fierce counterattacks of the enemy. The self-propelled guns of the 334th Guards Heavy Self-Propelled Artillery Regiment and artillery of the direct escort of the infantry approached the crossing. By fire, armor and maneuver, the enemy was repulsed. Battalions went forward to the west. Turn not to recall here the words of Marshal of the Soviet Union I. Eskenev from the book 45th. Without people like Major Shmygun, the regiment commander was in the war the master, without whom you cannot do in any case in any shop, especially in the shop of war. Without a master, a connoisseur of all the elements of this production, the business will not go as well as in the war. Without a regimental commander, a connoisseur of all the elements of the organization of all arms combat. Arkady Karlovich Shmygun, like many other brave officers, did not live to see the bright victory day. He who forced Sozhdezna, Dnieper, Berezina, Vistula, Oder died a brave death at the unmarked on maps channel Stadtgraben, being in the fighting order of the assault battalion. By the decree of the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR, he was awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. The second half of the first day of the offensive was held in continuous fighting. Frequent counterattacks of the enemy tried to stop the advance of our units, but here is what is characteristic in the reports of division commanders received by the Corps' headquarters. With a sober assessment of the situation, felt confident that the tasks will be accomplished. This confidence came, in my opinion, from the absolute conviction in the high combat capabilities of the troops. In the final battle for Berlin, it was difficult to find a squad, a platoon, a company, a battery, whose soldiers would not have shown in the battles, in addition to courage and bravery, mature martial skill, ingenuity, military. Thanks to these qualities, as no one else, always succeed modest toilers of war sappers. I would like to say a few kind words about them.
On the eve of the offensive, the commander of the sapper platoon of the 277th Rifle Regiment Junior, Lieutenant Mikhail Chupakin, under enemy fire, personally made a passage through the wire fence and minefields of the enemy, removing more than 100 mines. The next day, together with his subordinates again, under fire, Chupakin built a bridge over the Stadtgraben Canal, and only after a second wound was evacuated to the hospital, where later I had the opportunity to present him with the Order of the Red Banner.
Performing the combat task of making passages for artillery and self-propelled artillery units, the sappers of the 696th Separate Sapper Battalion distinguished themselves. They always worked qualitatively, with initiative, ingenuity, and courage, which helped them to achieve combat results with minimum expenditure of forces and resources, with preservation of soldiers' lives and large material values for the motherland. During the battles of April 16, 1945, the sappers removed 289 anti-tank mines, 132 anti-personnel mines, 48 high-explosive mines, and defused 43 shells. Hero of the Soviet Union Junior Sergeant Ivleev disarmed 120 anti-tank mines. Sergeant Chernyshев and his squad removed 160 anti-tank mines, and this was in the daytime under enemy fire. Meanwhile, the first day of our offensive was coming to an end. They ended with the most powerful fire attack of all the artillery of the corps, which we conducted at the suggestion of the artillery commander, Colonel A. Mikev, on Teringjuerda and other settlements, turned by the Nazis into powerful strongholds. This allowed the advanced assault battalions of the 60th and 175th Infantry Divisions to reach the boundary of the third enemy position. Corps units, in cooperation with neighbours, managed to break the main defensive line of the enemy, defeating the 606th German Infantry Division with reinforcement units. Our troops with battles forced the Canal Stadtgraben, the River Volsin, and more than 10 reclamation and drainage canals, which were used by Hitlerites as natural defence lines, reinforced with reinforced concrete fortifications. On the night of April 17, 1945, the Chief of Staff of the 125th Rifle Corps, Colonel Grigory Greshevsky, assessed the situation as follows. The Corps compounds by 1:00 a.m. on April 17, 1945 captured 2 positions of the enemy's main line of defence, reached the frontiers west of the line of the Beauregard-Teringjuerda Railroad. The immediate task of the Corps, having captured the 3rd position of the enemy Bohofsloz, Alt-Blisdorf, to capture the 2nd line of defence in the area of Vorstadt. To the front edge of the 2nd line of any defence about 5 kilometres, here to seize the 3rd position of the main line of defence of the enemy, consisting of 3 pre-prepared boundaries. According to intelligence, these lines are occupied by fresh, well-prepared troops. The enemy occupies commanding heights, well view all our battle orders. In addition to the Volsin River and the Noakan and Altakan canals, there are more than a dozen deep and wide drainage canals, which create special difficulties in moving our artillery. Having analysed the current situation, I set the Corps compounds the following tasks. In cooperation with the neighbour on the right 60th Infantry Division fire, and manoeuvre to break the enemy defences in the area of Kelsbrook. On the left, in cooperation with the 132nd Infantry Division, the 175th Infantry Division seizes the railroad bridge and fords the Volsin River.
Subsequently, converging blows, 60th and 175th Infantry Division, in the direction of Ostermannschuh flank strikes, curtailed the enemy defence southwest of Bohofsloz. In the future, the main forces of the Corps in the direction south of Ostermannschuh, with a concentrated blow, forced the canals Noakan, Altakaya, and seized the settlement of Vorstadt.
Again began heavy, bloody fighting. Each 100 metres repulsed from the enemy was given at the cost of considerable losses. In these conditions, the search for scouts was important.
On the night of April 18, the reconnaissance of the 277th Rifle Regiment managed to establish that the section of the Noakan Canal, northwest of Alt-Blisdorf, was covered by a small enemy barrier, and to the west of it there were no troops.
The troop scout is the first fighter in the chain of the advancing troops. With his observations, he penetrates into the enemy's plan, reveals his intentions, and helps the commander to make the best and timely decision. This immediately undid the regiment commander Lieutenant Nikolai Alexeyevich Kuznetsov. The 3rd Rifle Battalion of the regiment, under the command of Major St. Orloff, under the cover of night, covered by separate buildings of the village Alt-Blisdorf, on improvised means forced Noakan. In a quick hand-to-hand fight, he destroyed a small group of Hitlerites defending trenches on the other bank of the canal. Without delaying, the men of the 3rd Rifle Battalion went to the bank of the Altakan Canal. Here, as our regimental scouts reported, the enemy did not expect the appearance of our units, and therefore had no manpower or firepower in this area. As it turned out later, this was due to the fact that the Nazis during the day suffered heavy losses, especially in the area of Bohofsloz. The 277th Rifle Regiment, with 2 battalions, rapidly forced the Alta-Khan Canal, and by 5.0 on April 18, 1945, unexpectedly, for the enemy approached the northeastern outskirts of Blisdorf. The commander of the 175th Infantry Division, Colonel Zakhar Petrovich Vidrigan, introduced the 282nd Infantry Regiment of the Sverdlovsk-Warsaw Order of Kutuzov into the emerging breakthrough. The regiment commander, Lieutenant Colonel Nikolai Silivestovich Lazebnikov, quickly organized the forcing of both channels. The simultaneous attack of 2 rifle regiments allowed the 175th Rifle Division, in cooperation with its neighbor on the left, parts of the 132nd Rifle Division, at dawn on April 18, 1945, to seize a stronghold on the second line of defense of the Germans' Blisdorf and a section of the highway Vritzen-Vivi.
Thus, the second strip of the Hitlerites' defense in the Berlin direction was broken by our troops.